This film begins by showing two men from Ecuador named Felix and Diego who are deciding to migrate and try their luck at the border of America and Mexico. After walking quite a distance, they eventually join other immigrants to wait for the mercy of passing motorists who intend to offer them work. Before long, an American driver passing by calls for Diego to be hired as a construction worker. Unfortunately, as the American only needs one worker, Felix and Diego are forced to part ways. After that, Felix, still unemployed, then goes to a supermarket and begs a woman who has just come out of the supermarket to hire him. The woman refuses Felix as she does not need any workers. At that moment, a supermarket employee who witnesses Felix's behavior then comes out to warn him not to loiter around the supermarket and disturb its customers. Felix is forced to leave and approaches a middle-aged man named Alfonso who is eating on the open bed of his truck in the parking lot. After greeting Alfonso, Felix tries to ask for a job from him, but he explains that he also needs a job because since morning, no one has rented his truck's open bed. Upon hearing Alfonso's explanation, Felix chooses to leave, and because of thirst, Felix daringly enters the supermarket to get water from the tap. At that moment, a supermarket employee reprimands and drives him away who is considered a vagrant. Fortunately, a man named Donnie, wearing a wrist brace, appears and claims to be Felix's friend, then takes him around the supermarket to buy food. Felix thanks Donnie for helping him, while Donnie explains that he needs 2 workers to dig soil, each of whom he will pay $150. Without hesitation, Felix accepts Donnie's job offer, but he must find another worker so that the job can be done promptly. Not wanting to waste the opportunity, Felix immediately approaches Alfonso to offer him the job. However, Alfonso refuses, stating that he can earn $170 for each rental of his truck, so Felix promises to give an additional $30 from his own wages to persuade Alfonso to work with him. Upon hearing this, Alfonso agrees to the offer, and the two of them set off in Alfonso's truck to follow Donnie's vehicle to the excavation site. During the journey, Felix talks about his wife who is waiting for him to come home with a lot of money because they dream of opening a restaurant in Ecuador. Although Alfonso seems uninterested in Felix's story, he wishes him well in achieving his dream with his wife. After traveling quite a distance, they arrive in front of a building in the desert where Donnie immediately marks the ground that Felix and Alfonso need to dig. Meanwhile, Donnie has brought his friend named Steve, who is waiting in the car, while keeping an eye on the surroundings. Without revealing the purpose of the excavation, Donnie orders Felix and Alfonso to start working. 30 minutes later, they are suddenly approached by a cowboy-hatted man on horseback who asks why Felix and Alfonso are digging on his property. Arrogantly, Donnie tells the cowboy that all the land from California to New York is his, claiming the freedom to do whatever he wants with it. Upon hearing this, the cowboy becomes enraged and points his gun at Donnie, only for Steve, still in the car, to suddenly fire a shot that kills the cowboy. Unbeknownst to Felix and Alfonso, Donnie and Steve are gang members who have stolen $5 million from a cartel called Zetas. Apparently, the land that Felix is digging is intended to bury the bodies of 4 Zetas cartel members that Donnie and Steve have killed. After knowing this, Felix and Alfonso are left speechless, realizing they are entangled with gangsters. Switching to a man who is riding a bicycle, he is seen going to a warehouse he assumes is empty because he wants to urinate. While looking for a place to urinate, the man is shocked to find several bodies lying in the warehouse. At the same time, a man named Gibson approaches the man, claiming to be a police detective on patrol. Gibson then asks the man to leave the warehouse immediately. In reality, Gibson is the right-hand man of the Zetas cartel leader, hunting down Donnie and Steve for robbing and killing the cartel members. Back in the desert, Donnie and Steve are seen taking out several bodies of Zetas cartel members and then ordering Felix and Alfonso to bury all the bodies, including the cowboys. When Alfonso notices Donnie and his partner are distracted, he attacks the 2 gangsters, managing to knock them unconscious. Before leaving, Alfonso steals Steve's luxury watch and urges Felix to leave the place. Unbeknownst to them, Donnie regains consciousness and attempts to shoot Alfonso and Felix. Fortunately, Alfonso and Felix manage to get into Donnie's car and escape, although Felix gets shot in the leg. On the way, Alfonso stops at a gas station to refuel and asks Felix to stay in the car while he buys new clothes for both of them. While Alfonso is away, Felix accidentally finds $1 million belonging to Donnie under the car seat. Without Alfonso's knowledge, he quietly puts the money into his bag. Shortly after, Alfonso returns and, without suspecting Felix, the middle-aged man continues their journey to his friend's workshop named Rob Carlton to switch cars and treat Felix's gunshot wound. Meanwhile, in the desert, Steve, who has regained consciousness, wakes up Donnie, who is badly injured from being stabbed by Alfonso. At that moment, Steve suggests that they immediately chase after Felix and Alfonso, who have stolen Donnie's car where they stored the stolen money from the Zetas cartel. Donnie agrees and asks Steve to take him to a doctor before he bleeds out. Returning to Felix and Alfonso, they are seen arriving at Rob's workshop, which is locked. Alfonso tries to break the lock when Rob suddenly appears, pointing a gun at him because he thinks a thief is trying to break into his workshop. After realizing it is Alfonso, Rob is shocked to see that he is still alive. From their conversation, it is revealed that Alfonso is a former hitman who never failed to eliminate his targets, earning him the nickname God Killer. That moment, Alfonso explains that he is there to borrow Rob's car because the car he is using can be easily tracked by its owner. Alfonso also asks Rob for help in contacting a doctor who can treat Felix's gunshot wound. Shortly after, Rob manages to contact Dr. Growler, who instructs Rob to bring Felix to his clinic. Without hesitation, Alfonso takes Felix to Growler's clinic using a car borrowed from Rob. Meanwhile, the car Alfonso stole from Donnie is handed over to Rob for destruction. Upon arriving at the clinic, Alfonso remains unaware that Felix is hiding $1 million in his bag. After Alfonso explains Felix's gunshot wound, the former hitman receives a call from Rob, instructing him to return to the workshop immediately. Alfonso then entrusts Felix to Growler and promises to return to the clinic as soon as possible. Before leaving, Alfonso also gives a sum of money and a luxury watch he stole from Steve as payment to Growler. A while later, Growler begins the surgery to remove the bullet from Felix's leg. After the surgery is completed, Growler advises Felix to wait for Alfonso in the recovery room. Returning to Alfonso, who has arrived at the workshop, where Rob informs him that he found $1 million under each car seat, except for the seat Felix was sitting on. Upon hearing this explanation from Rob, Alfonso suspects that Felix took the other $1 million without telling him. Feeling disappointed with Felix, Alfonso decides to return to the clinic immediately to ask about the money. At the same time, Felix is calling his cousin who lives in America using Growler's phone. At that moment, Felix asks for his cousin's full address because he plans to escape to his cousin's house with the $1 million he stole. Unbeknownst to Felix, Steve and Donnie have arrived in front of Growler's clinic, where Steve demands that the doctor immediately treat Donnie. Growler initially refuses, saying his clinic is closed, but after Steve roughly pushes him, the doctor has no choice but to take Donnie to the operating room. At the same time, Felix realizes that Donnie and Steve are at the clinic, so he tries to escape before the gangsters find him. In the operating room, Steve continually pressures Growler to revive Donnie, who is still unconscious from the anesthesia. Growing increasingly frustrated, Growler secretly grabs a pistol from his drawer to attack Steve. Unfortunately, Steve shoots and kills the doctor first. Shortly afterward, Steve finds some money and his watch that Alfonso had stolen earlier, leading Steve to suspect that Felix and Alfonso had been to the clinic. Sometime later, Donnie, now awake, realizes he is in a clinic and has received treatment. Steve claims that he saved Donnie's life, and in return, he asks him to find Felix and Alfonso and retrieve the missing $5 million. Annoyed by Steve's arrogance, Donnie becomes angry and shoots his partner dead, as Donnie dislikes being ordered around by others. Switching to the clinic, Felix is still trying to escape, but because his leg is injured, he decides to crawl. At that moment, Donnie spots Felix and begins crawling after him, until eventually he catches Felix, who apologizes and promises to return the $1 million in his bag. Despite this, Donnie demands that Felix return the full $5 million, even though Felix insists he doesn't know where the rest of Donnie's money is. Just as Donnie is about to kill Felix, Gibson suddenly appears and kills Donnie. After that, Gibson interrogates Felix about the remaining $4 million. When Felix admits to taking $1 million from one of Donnie's car seats, Gibson assumes the rest of the Zetas cartel's money is in that car. Without hesitation, Gibson drags Felix and throws him into the trunk of his car, especially after he reveals the location of Donnie's car, which Rob had destroyed. Shortly after Gibson leaves, Alfonso arrives at the clinic and finds Steve and Growler dead. Simultaneously, Rob calls Alfonso, asking him to return to the workshop because someone is looking for him. At the workshop, Rob is seen shooting at the car driven by Gibson, but he finds no one except Felix, who is shouting from the trunk. When he opens the trunk, Felix immediately informs him that Gibson is hiding in another car. At that moment, Gibson emerges from a different direction and shoots Rob dead. Gibson then locks Felix back in the trunk, intending to search around Rob's workshop for the remaining $4 million. Unfortunately, Gibson doesn't find it, despite ransacking every corner of the workshop. Unbeknownst to him, Rob and Alfonso had hidden the money, and now only Alfonso knows where all the money is stored. Shortly after, Alfonso arrives at the workshop and immediately approaches Rob, who is lying lifeless. Noticing Alfonso's arrival, Gibson approaches the former hitman and throws the bag containing the $1 million that Felix had stolen. At that moment, he threatens to kill Alfonso if he does not reveal the location of the remaining $4 million. Alfonso says he will give up the remaining money on the condition that Gibson releases Felix. Despite being initially disappointed with Felix for taking $1 million from Donnie's car, Alfonso still cares about Felix, who reminds him of his younger brother. After that, Gibson agrees to Alfonso's terms and releases Felix from the car trunk. At that moment, Alfonso, aware that Gibson is part of the Zetas cartel, claims he could easily kill Gibson, especially since he once single-handedly took down the cartel's leader. Gibson is unfazed by Alfonso's threat and keeps his gun pointed at Felix until Alfonso reveals the location of the cartel's $4 million. Not wanting Felix to get hurt, Alfonso asks Gibson to release Felix first before disclosing the money's location. Just as Gibson releases Felix, Alfonso takes the opportunity to kill him. Shortly afterward, Felix apologizes to Alfonso for hiding the $1 million in his bag, but Alfonso no longer cares about that and instead gives all the remaining stolen money to Felix. Alfonso then asks him to return to Ecuador and use the money to open his dream restaurant. Meanwhile, Alfonso decides to stay behind because he is certain the Zetas cartel will come to the workshop looking for their money. Upon hearing this, Felix hugs Alfonso in gratitude before finally leaving America using Rob's car. At the end of the film, it shows Alfonso enjoying his morning while relaxing at Rob's workshop until the Zetas cartel group arrives and surrounds him. Because Alfonso does not provide the information that the gangsters want, he is shot dozens of times without offering any resistance. Despite having to lose his life, Alfonso deliberately does all of this as a way to atone for his past sins when he was a ruthless hitman. Moral lesson from the story: if you ever find yourself burying bodies in the desert with gangsters, remember to bring a shovel, a friend, and an escape plan. It's always better to dig your way out of trouble than into it.